Would you let Jeffrey Epstein watch your kids? Didn't think so. What about his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell? Hard pass. So why trust him? Mark Carney, Maxwell's friend, not yours.
Happy Friday. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. Second take. Yes, this is my Friday show with the extended election coverage going on. We're in the final days of this thing. I'm sure just about everybody's sick of it, but nobody's probably happy with how things are coming out. Well, maybe the Liberals are. They thought they were, a month ago, we all thought they were out of the race, and now it's they still seem to be leading. And but it is neck and neck. I mean, nobody, I think, can confidently say what the hell is going to happen on Monday. Just be sure to tune in here at the Western Standard, 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We're starting that coverage of it, and we'll watch those results as they come in, good, bad, or ugly. So I got a few guests coming on today. We've got Sam Cooper of the Bureau, and he's going to talk foreign interference. This is his specialty there, and he's really opened up a lot of stuff. And it seems to have been forgotten in this election. I mean, this is what was dragging the Liberals down for a year and a half, and now the election's on, and we're barely hearing about it. But we're hearing about candidates being targeted and things. It's still going on. We're just not hearing about it. Crystal Whitvrongel is going to come on from the Montreal Economic Institute. Another thing that did come up, but it's still kind of been forgotten, is the No More Pipelines bill. And if the Liberals get in, they're going to keep it. So that means we're not going to get any more pipelines. It doesn't matter what Carney's promising. He's kind of establishing himself as a pretty effective liar, but it doesn't seem to matter to the East. And then we're going to talk to Jared Yeager of the Western Standard. He's our BC fella out there. He's been on the ground and just kind of wrap things up, what he's seeing from that perspective out there in Lotus Land. I mean, it's going to be kind of a swing province. We don't quite know where BC is going to go. That could be the one that decides things. We'll see what happens. So yes, a lot to cover today and a lot to talk about. Well, let's kick things off with a news update from our news editor, Dave Naylor, though, and see what else is topping the headlines. Hey, Dave.
Sorry, no news today, Cory.
No news today.
No news today.
It's kind of quiet in the newsroom today.
Well, everybody's out covering election stuff. So yeah, you're right. It's almost over. Thank goodness. I hear your long-suffering wife is actually suffering today.
She is.
What happened?
Well, they gave her tramadol for a prescription, so I mean the suffering will ease for a little while.
Okay, we got to tell people what happened.
She's at a quilt show, setting up her booth in Sylvan Lake, and got up on a step and fell off it and managed to break her arm.
Oh no!
Yes, it's funny. Another time she broke her arm was working on a wild road. No, this was Alberta Alliance election campaign when Paul Hinman won in Calgary Glenmore. She tripped on a guy wire while we were main streeting on the side of the. She's always been a klutz. Fantastic, wonderful, beautiful woman. But boy, I'm going to have to get her like a hockey gear or something.
Or bubble wrap or something. Do you feel a bit of guilt that you weren't there to do it?
No,
not at all.
I wouldn't have helped. I mean, if I was there, the accident could have been worse, or I would have been at least blamed for the distraction that caused her to fall off of that. So at least I'll get to come out and visit and help her tomorrow.
Exactly. Nice. So yeah, it's coming to an end, Cory. I think everybody's grateful to that. Polls seem to be narrowing. Who knows? It could be a conservative minority, liberal majority. I don't think anybody knows. We had all those millions and millions of votes cast early in the polls, but again, nobody knows who favors that. The riding with the most ballots was Carleton, where Polyv is apparently, according to the Globe and Mail, in deep trouble and could lose his seat. So there's going to be a lot to keep an eye out on Monday. We could hopefully hear the last that we'll ever have to hear of Jagmeet Singh and Elizabeth May, because they're both at the moment projected to perhaps lose their seats. So there's going to be tons to keep an eye on Monday. And as you said, you've got you'll be in part of the show with Derek and Nigel at 6 o'clock, and I'll be busily right behind us here, doing a live blog and writing the election main. We're going to have Jared in beautiful downtown Burnaby covering Singh. We're trying to anyways. So they haven't answered one of our emails the entire election. You know, Tories and the Liberals, no problem, but NDP is radio silence. They don't like us, Cory.
No, who'd have thunk it, eh?
And look what happened to Rachel Noddy when she didn't like us.
Well, and yeah, Jagmeet, I'm going to talk a little bit about that later when I'm talking on things. But there's been discussion too, though, that the Conservatives have kind of taken a stonewalling to the media approach throughout most of this, independent and legacy. And, I won't get up and say that's what made the difference and perhaps why they're lagging, but it certainly doesn't seem to have done them any favors.
No, and they're getting a lot of bad press about it from the mainstream media. But just this morning, our Chris Oldcorn was at a rally for Polyv in Saskatoon, and they allowed 4 questions. One of them was from the phone from Calgary, from Dinger.
Oh, that's half the.
So there goes half the press conference.
Preamble there.
2 of them were in French. Right. So how many people in Saskatoon do you think speak French? Right. I know you've got to pander to Quebec, but they do have some weird things going on with the media. But so wrapping up the weekend here, we've got Jared will be at a big Polyv rally in Vancouver, Richmond to be exact, on Saturday. Jen will be a busy girl. She'll be traveling to Ottawa on Sunday, covering Polyev's final rally there in his home riding. They're not even calling it rallies anymore. It's just whistle stops. So I'm assuming it's just going to be Polyv saying, big house, nice street, safe crimes under a flag.
The Calgary one today is supposed to be only a
whistle stop
blast too, right? Out the door. That'll be the first time he's hit Alberta in this whole campaign.
Yeah, exactly. So Jen will cover that rally, and then she'll be hopefully bouncing back between Carney's headquarters and Polyev's headquarters on election night. So hopefully they're close. All right, or we may have to pick one or the other, but.
So where they book it. I mean, that Ottawa core is pretty dense. You can kind of cover some ground, but if they've stuck them across town, it could be problematic.
Could be problematic. And we're gonna live stream Polyev's stop in Calgary, starting at 1:00 today. Sean Polzer, the reporter, is up there, so I assume he's going to be checking in with you at some point.
I'm just letting people know that is the plan. Towards the tail end of the show, we should be checking in with Sean. He's going up there and going to be covering things, but just sometimes those field hits can go a little difficult. So I'm not going to make a promise, but that's the intention. And then we will stream that after this show. Yes.
Yeah. Now, of course, they're always late, so you may have to drag this out for hours.
Well, I'll see what I can do. I mean, I've had a lot of coffee this morning. I might need somebody to come in with a bucket or something.
Well, you just send me a note and I'll bring you one in, and you'll be good. But
I'll get a catheter for election night.
You like to talk, so I'm sure you'll have no problem filling it. So yeah, it's exciting days ahead, and Western Standard's going to be in all the right places at the right time.
Right on. Well, I'll let you get back to your guests.
Yeah, and you get right into that. This is why we need subscribers, so we can get reporters out to these places.
Absolutely. I mean, that's important.
It is.
It pays the bills.
Pays the bills.
Right on. Okay, thanks, Dave.
You bet, Cory.
All right. And yes, as Dave said, and he's our news editor, the reason we can pay those bills, this is how, it's the bulk of our funding here at the Western Standard is subscribers. And, you just look at the makeup of things. You dance with the one that brung you. When you look at media, legacy media, the way they lean to the government, well, why do you think they do? Because they're getting tax funded. As long as we're relying on subscriptions to pay our bills, we remain accountable to you. And lots of people have, thousands of people have subscribed. It's $10 a month, $100 for a year. Well worth it. Gets past that paywall. There is no paywall till the end of the election, but that's coming up in just a few days, and then you'll still have to pay those bucks. So come on, guys, if you haven't subscribed, get on there, take one out. If you have already, thank you very much. We really, really do appreciate it. And yeah, what a bizarre election it's been, just such a swing. So, that's where I'm not feeling good about Monday, I got to admit, but I wouldn't take any prediction to the bank right now. The electorate is volatile. It really is. So there's never been a time when we've seen it drop from so from so high to where it's gone. And that also means it can swing the other way pretty fast. Roma Eterna saying, I can't believe the Liberals will take 4 Calgary ridings up from 1. Worldwide mass immigration must end. The East is already gone. I don't know. I don't know if I'd blame that on immigration. A lot of new Canadians, I've worked on those campaigns, are very conservative, actually. We've got a lot of conservatives out there. They don't want that either. We've got some serious issues going on. It's an urban-rural problem. It's been kind of larger. And I don't know if 4 Calgary ridings are really in play or not. That one I'll see. That's a bit of a stretch. But when you get into Northeast Calgary, for example, that's where George Chahal is. Now, he's also known, and I like to remind everybody of it, he's the porch pirate. In the last election, the fool went up to a household. He was delivering flyers, a good, hardworking campaigner, good for you. But he noticed there was a conservative flyer in the mailbox. So there was a doorbell cam. This life today, you're always being watched, but he didn't realize this. So he stole the conservative flyer and put the liberal one in. And he still managed to win the election. He's still the Liberal member of Parliament up there, and he's still running again. But it caused so much embarrassment that he didn't even end up in cabinet. Like the way it typically works, if a government gets in, whoever an Alberta Liberal is, and I said that in my last show, it doesn't do us any favors. It doesn't matter. The Liberals will screw us, whether they're Alberta Liberals or Liberals from somewhere else. But Chahal never got put in cabinet because, you can't put a porch pirate in your cabinet. And then we had the Randys up at Edmonton. That was the only other Liberal. And of course, he resigned in disgrace, finally decided not to run because of just one scandal after another. The problem is these Liberals are corrupt to the core. But now Chahal is running again and he might win. If you've worked elections in Northeast Calgary, you do have to understand that the parties don't matter as much as how you work the communities. And, I got to watch how I phrase it. Every party deals with the same thing. And there's some truth to that. Northeast Calgary is a predominantly high new Canadian area. A lot of Indian, South Asian people living up there. And they tend to vote based on where community leaders are telling them to go, as opposed to where parties will. So it's who's playing that ground game better who tends to win it. So it's actually more swing ridings up there because you can see some of those Northeast ridings going strongly conservative sometimes. But yeah, they'll swing Liberal the other. So whether or not Chahal is going to get in up there, I don't know. But the game up there doesn't matter as much on what's going on actually on the central party front as it is the local candidate and how they're connecting with that community. It's a bizarre area to work. And it's difficult. When we were up there, I think I've told that story before, when the Wild Rose Party was going, we were running nominations. This must have been 10, 12 years ago. Daniel Smith was leading it back then. And we had a problem. It was Calgary Cross. I don't think that constituency even exists anymore. 5 people signed up to run in it. And then within days, like this is for the nomination, thousands and thousands of new memberships all poured into the party office from up there. Like amazing. Nobody in a nomination tends to sell thousands of memberships that fast. The party rules are everybody is supposed to buy their own membership by themselves to avoid that kind of flooding. The reality is, and it turned out, 4 out of the 5 candidates all had the same lists of people, just basically cut checks for the amount of the people, bought memberships for them all automatically, made up the whole works. It was brutal. There was overlap. There was duplication. All of these candidates had sold to the same people, supposedly sold to the same people over and over. Vitor Marciano, he was our executive director at the time. We knew this is going to stink because the only candidate who didn't flood it was, the others were all of Indian and South Asian origin. And the one non-Indian in the bunch, the one white guy, wasn't the only one who didn't break the rules. But that's going to look awful if you disqualify the 4 brown folks and keep the one white guy. But what are you supposed to do? So he spent days, him with some helpers, knocking on doors, gathering the evidence, collecting it, just showing, look at this. This household's claiming that it's got 12 people living in it. There's only 2 people here. This person's been signed up by all 4 of the other candidates. Lots of other things. Built a huge case before disqualifying those 4 candidates, which we did. And the backlash wasn't too big because every other party who deals in Northeast Calgary also knows this could bite us in the butt one day too. It's a different sort of politics up there. It's an ethnic play, and it's unfortunate. It's great that new Canadians are taking part in the process, But in that particular community, they look at things differently, and it's just more of a game to be won. And the party doesn't matter as much. It's a matter of who's where, and it's a tough area to work. Either way, that's where George Chahal's hammering around, and he might win his seat back, not because he deserves it. I mean, he's been an ineffective member of parliament. He's embarrassed things. He's the porch pirate, and we'll see what happens up in there. So some of the games being played, speaking of which, it's not unique to there. There's that stupid long ballot protest you might have seen before. Out in Ottawa, Carleton, that's where Polyv is running. It's his own riding. And there's this anti-democratic, I'll say it, group. And I got to wonder about a bit of this, okay? They've started this long ballot thing where basically, and they've done it in a couple of by-elections, they just get dozens and dozens and dozens of people to sign up as candidates in the election just so the ballot has loads of people. They got 90 people on the ballot. So, I mean, somebody wants to go in and vote for anybody, or if it's Polyv or anything, they've got to search through all those. And those ballots are randomized. They don't even do it in alphabetical because it might give an advantage to some, like they try to keep things fair all over. When it makes a mess, you've got to search through 90 names to find him. And why? What's your point? What's your purpose? And where's the money coming from? Like 90, you've got to put in deposits of, I believe it's $1,000. It's refundable if you file your papers and everything else. But, we're talking possibly $100,000, $90,000. Plus, you've got to get signatures of 100 people living in the riding with their phone number, their address, the whole works on it. This is a real petition to run. It's not easy to do. That's a few days' work. So how did you find 90 people willing to spend that much money and that much time to flood a ballot and screw up an election somewhere? I honestly feel it should be investigated. I mean, you have a right to run, and these people do. And, there might not be any law having been broken. Who knows? I just want to know who's behind it then. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? I mean, is your interest really democracy? Is your interest really making it better? Or is it just throwing sand in the gears? It's not a democratic movement. It's an offense to democracy. It's screwing with the process. If you really don't like him, you campaign against him. You run seriously against them, not trying to flood a constituency with people. Yeah, Sam seems to be late again. That's why I'm rambling a bit. So let's talk about some of the issues that have been going on. Somebody saying Chinese money, foreign money, and one of the commenters I thought I saw there, but that could be, I don't know. And that's the issue. Foreign interference, like I was talking about, is it's been forgotten. This was one of the biggest issues in Canada for years. The Liberals got away with ragging the puck. They dragged it out. Trudeau appointed his buddy there to run. He'll be a special rapporteur, and that fell apart because it was stupid. And then we have one report after another report that doesn't say anything, and they're blacked out, and we're dragging our heels. And then there's another one that comes up and basically says, yeah, 11 people were compromised, but yeah, it's not that big a deal. Years of this, and he got away with it. Think about the gravity of what has happened. 11 elected people were compromised. And so they say, oh, well, it's only in a minor way. What? And we never got to find out who they are. This is a big deal. These are people in the highest positions of power who are now beholden to somebody overseas. Everybody's, freaking out quite a bit about the American issues, which they should. We got some issues going on in the United States. There's no doubt about that. But what about this stuff we've been documenting for so long already? And this should be a bigger issue, yet we've barely heard about it. So, I mean, we had a conservative candidate actually stop campaigning publicly because the RCMP warned him that he might be in danger. Like, again, think about the threat to democracy this is. This is not a minor affair. This should be headline sort of things going on. And we've let it become overshadowed by the American mess that's going on, unfortunately, and we really should. There would have been no better time to discuss this. Actually, the better time to discuss it would be before the election, rather than even during, because we don't know if somebody's compromised or they aren't, and it adds suspicion and it adds questioning of the process. And the next best time would have been during the election, but we've barely ever heard about it, at least from the candidates and parties. But somebody we've heard a lot about it from has been Sam Cooper with the Bureau. He's been very prolific, lots of stories. This is his file, and he's been magnificent on it for years now, and he's still hammering at it. So thank you very much for joining us today, Sam.
Glad to be with you, Cory.
So, you might have heard a bit of my preamble there. Just that this frustration, like I was trying to explain the gravity of what's going on. We've got other nations using Canada as a playground to kind of play politics within it. And we're in the middle of a federal election, yet this issue doesn't really seem to be resonating during this campaign.
Well, I agree with you. It's really confusing to look at the scale of foreign interference. First of all, as you know, that I revealed in our recent elections, there's, I would say, as my document reporting has shown, Chinese Communist Party documents suggest that China has been pleased in the recent elections that up to from 40 to 50 nominees it would be supportive of were put forward for the major political parties. And the Hague Commission completely minimized the evidence, in my view, of how deep the interference was. But as we see in the current campaign, it's almost hard to list off all the known cases that have surfaced, from a former police officer suggesting his conservative rival could be taken to the Chinese consulate for a bounty, that candidate replaced by Mark Carney with another former police officer who my reporting revealed had traveled to Beijing for a high-level military parade, had any number of connections to Chinese United Front networks in Toronto. And so you're right. For the people that are following it and now know what the United Front is, I think that they've started to probably adopt the view that I have, that this problem is getting worse in Canada. And yet you're right, at the mainstream level, it hasn't gotten through to millions of Canadians who, in my view, I'll just use the vernacular, have been gaslit very successfully by the Liberal Party into believing that this election is all about repelling the invaders from the South, which I just don't think is the case. And that's not to underestimate that President Donald Trump's trolling of Canada has been confusing and even scary. But I just think that that's not the concern for Canadians. And those that believe that's the concern, I think they're living in rather a disillusioned world that will not help Canada's standing in the long run.
And I know it gets really speculative. It's difficult to figure out the motivations, but I was just gobsmacked. You can see something going wrong on a riding level. You made a mistake. Things turned disastrous. That first, policeman who, after those appalling statements about his opponent, he got pulled out. But you would think then the Liberals are going to be really gun shy. We're going to make sure we put in somebody who has absolutely no connection to, it would only make sense to Beijing on any level, and they replace him with somebody virtually as bad, perhaps just not as badly outspoken as the last one. Is this a case of incompetence, or are they compromised? I just don't get it.
Well, Cory, I could talk for days about this, and I've written a book about it. If I really want to be direct here, the Liberal Party of Mark Carney, which Mark Carney took over, essentially has a system in place, or rather has acquiesced to a system called Beijing's United Front Work Department. And it's very active, by the way, in other nations, Australia, New Zealand, the United States as well, where community groups in the diaspora, unfortunately, have been co-opted and controlled by Beijing's agents who task business people in the community, get them to surround our Canadian political leaders. And essentially the trade is, we will provide funding for your party, we will provide votes, but we will get to essentially suggest to you the candidates you should put in place. So for Mark Carney to put a former Toronto police officer, senior executive in place that, as my reporting, followed by the Globe and Mail, revealed, has very tight ties to these very same Beijing-connected community groups, I don't think that a Mark Carney really has much of a choice unless he wants to buck that system. And he won't buck that system. I can say, I'll get into the weeds a little bit here. The Globe and Mail, following my reporting, broke a story that Mark Carney had met with one of these very same Toronto-based community groups in January, signaling sort of to the community that he is friendly with these Beijing-supported groups. And, that message means a lot to the Chinese consulate people that are in charge of interference. And really, at the end of the day, these people, there's a trade going on. You support us, we support you, and the candidates that Beijing favors will be put forward.
Yeah, and well, and I'm glad you brought up your book, because you wrote a fantastic one that kind of goes really into the weeds and the depth. I mean, this is an issue that goes back a long ways and is entrenched in a whole number of areas. And it's not just the Liberals. I mean, even this is going back prior to Stephen Harper. Even we've had problems with this, issues with this, and governments that are just very reticent on stepping in and doing anything about it. As you wrote, the money laundering in West Coast casinos. I mean, the tentacles of how this all ties together, even and your most recent story on the fentanyl triangle. It's such a web to unravel. Maybe it's the fact that it's so bloody complicated that people are having trouble grasping just what this is all about.
I really do think that's the case. And, if we're talking about successive governments, some of them more, some of them less, being influenced by Beijing, I think at the end of the day, this is a little bit of a West versus East story. And if we really want to delve into the weeds or maybe get to the core of it, there's something called the Canada-China Business Council, which has been historically, some have called it the power behind the throne of Liberal prime ministers, starting with Pierre Trudeau. We literally have various Liberal prime ministers that have sat on the boards of, powerful Quebec corporate entities that I have reported for the Bureau. Jonathan Manthorpe did a great book as well. These Quebec corporate industrialists have direct ties to Chinese Communist Party senior business families. And I think that's what's behind this, conservative prime ministers have been influenced that as well. We have Stephen Harper, who my reporting shows was taking a stronger national security line against Beijing, was willing to stand against some of the oil resource field investment from Beijing entities, but was sort of that position was watered down again by this East Coast Canada-China Business Council, which at the end of the day, I'm asserting, if you look at Mark Carney's choices, there's a lot of smart people I talk to in the security world that say it's the Canada-China Business Council behind him that's really pulling a lot of those strings.
So, I mean, we won't know till Monday what our government's going to look like going forward. This issue isn't going to go away, but what's it going to take to get it rectified? I mean, we've had so many now panels and commissions and just, they drag their feet and they hide the data. I won't be shocked if we find out 6 months after this election, oh, by the way, there was interference in this riding, this riding, this riding, and this riding, but we're not going to tell you anything about it. What on earth does it take anymore?
Well, I do think that if a conservative government won, there would be a disruption to the system in place, which I'm asserting with good confidence is a great deal of corruption going on involving politicians, law firms, corporations that really have a great deal of business interest tied to Beijing. And at the end of the day, I have argued that Beijing's intelligence and saturation level in interference in Canada is about splitting Ottawa from Washington. In other words, splitting Canadians from our closest and deepest allies, our American cousins and brothers and sisters. So what's it going to take? I believe at the end of the day, the Conservatives would be, a directional improvement they probably wouldn't really get to the bottom of things because they have their own issues, as you know. You cannot say that the Conservative Party would just snap their fingers and do away with Chinese interference or interference from India or the corruption that is in Canada's government. I'm saying, so what does it take? It'll take a lot more hard action from Washington, I believe, and a lot more tough medicine that a lot of sort of elderly, more socialist-leaning Canadians don't understand, that the U.S. does have some deep and real concerns about Canada's lack of seriousness on national security.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad you brought that up because that kind of hit the news recently. China kind of made a bit of a play almost, and it wasn't well received by most people, but they're kind of along the lines of, well, you've got that wild man south of the border. You got President Trump. He's difficult to deal with, but here we are. Come on, we can tighten our relationship. Now's the time Canada and China should become closer. And it was almost a transparent reach into Canadian politics, when the Americans are providing such a distraction. I mean, the reality is they're still going to be our best ally, our largest trading partner down in the United States. No matter, Trump is off the rails. He's Trump, but he's not going to be there forever, and the Americans will. So tightening ties with China right now, we can't abandon them. We're very integrated with them, but it just seemed like a pretty transparent grab at things while we were, on the outs with our neighbors right now.
Yeah, I believe so. And this story is being played out in Europe. It's being played out around the world. When I really stepped back, I was talking to a security community friend today and said, look, if you had asked me 5 years ago, after, I was digging into my book, Willful Blindness, what should Canada do? I would say, year by year, we should be cutting trade ties with China. We should be manufacturing in North America. If they are intentionally sending fentanyl precursors into our nations to kill our citizens, the only responsible thing to do if they don't stop is basically stop trading with them, trade with the rest of the world. So what's happening south of the border in a very abrupt, explosive way, President Trump is doing that. And he's making it worse by being very mean-spirited in his language with people around the world, just playing sort of the American high horse. And everyone knows in diplomacy, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. So they're messing up what I believe should be the strategic direction of the world, which is to shift away from China, but do it slowly, surely. Don't start any wars. And you're right. So what happens when they handle it rather badly in Washington? You get diplomats from China saying, let's get closer. We're really friends. We respect you. To which I have a visceral reaction saying, yes, some Canadians were recently killed in China. You take our citizens hostage. I myself have been told I can't safely travel to China. So, and I even posted on X. Ironic that you'd say, China, you want to get close to us, because I know from my police sources that your diplomats in Canada are surveilled meeting with drug dealers. So indeed, I would never think or advocate that Canada should get closer to China, but it's a world of political turmoil and a lack of diplomacy we're in the middle of right now.
It's something else, and the discussion just keeps going on and on. Right? I mean, I just really appreciate you working so hard to have brought it up in the first place, and you're keeping it going, because we're going to need to have this discussion going forward and for more time to come. So before I let you go, I mean, your book's Willful Blindness. It's available, I imagine, on Amazon and the usual places.
Yeah, you can find it most easily on Amazon. I saw that it got up to the top 100 again in Canada, so that's quite the feat, really. I'm pleased after 4 years on the market, and especially at the Bureau.news, the platform where I'm breaking, similar sort of deep reporting almost every day. So go to the Bureau.news and read that type of reporting that was in Willful Blindness.
Yeah, no, your book is fantastic, and I've told people that before, and I strongly suggest folks go out and get a copy. It gives a real great background, give it more understanding kind of the whole roots of this whole mess. And again, as you said, the Bureau, boy, yeah, it just keeps, I look forward to the emails coming into my inbox. You guys are covering stuff fantastically there. So I thank you again, Sam, for your work and for coming on today to talk to us.
Great to be back, Cory. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. So yes, that was Sam Cooper, and like I said, the book is Willful Blindness, and as I said as well, he's speaking up, he's carrying on. This is his issue. He's owned it, and he's done a fantastic job with it. So seek him out, check it out, and see what you got to do with it. Okay, let's talk about a couple of the questions. I see Kenzie said, what about the tariffs with China? And that's another issue that is big. And there's a trade war going on with China, and that's being overlooked. And part of it is we got ourselves into it. I hate to say we, but Canada put tariffs on Chinese vehicles, which led to reciprocal tariffs, which are now harming farmers in central Canada, through the prairies, because China is one of the bigger buyers for seed crops and oil crops and things such as that. And it's just that I brought Sam on, though, more to talk about the interference issue. It's such a difficult thing. I mean, China is a huge nation. They are patient. They're smart. The Chinese government, they take their time, and they look and plan long. And it's difficult to deal with as well, because China provides us a lot of good things. I mean, our consumer products are as low as they are in many, many levels because they were manufactured in China. If you really want to bring things home, like Trump keeps talking about others, and we want to reduce the dependence, there's no doubt about that. But if you want to talk about shutting down trade with China, it can be done, but you better be prepared to spend a whole lot of more money on pretty much everything. Now we've let ourselves get into that position. Suzanne saying, I received my book this week, Willful Blindness. Thank you, Thank you, Sam Cooper. Yeah, and Kenzie saying, about the book as well. Again, and that's what's important, to support independent journalists like Sam, buying the book, subscribing to his thing, The Bureau, because nobody else, in legacy media is really digging into that. Sam was digging into this when he used to be with Global, and he's not with them any longer. And he's really the only one still digging into this very important thing. And it's not just China. Canada's a soft touch for a number of them. He did mention India, and India has been playing games in Vancouver, with stuff going on with the Sikh separatist communities, and those battles are going on within Vancouver. We start taking on these battles by proxy, and it just shows that Canada's not got good control of its own borders, which is really distressing in general. Lots of other countries are going to come in and meddle around because they're looking out for their own interests, and they find Canada a good place to do it, especially as we are a good jumping off point right next to the United States. Kenzie saying, I think Sam is a brave man. He is. And when I had him on my show last time, he had spoken that there were potentially threats. Like, it's a dangerous place to get. A lot of the Chinese population who came to Canada still have strong ties in China. It's they immigrated here to start a new life, get away from other things, but they still have family members over there, and they remain very tight knit with the communities here in Canada. Unfortunately, you see, most of these interference cases, the stuff we're seeing going on, the threats, the things like that, are by Chinese Communist Party agents within Canada. They have those Chinese, they call them police stations within Canada, in Canada. And these are who they tend to target, are new Canadians who came from China. And they can twist their arms. They can threaten their families back in China, or they can threaten them here. And that's why it was so appalling for that Liberal candidate to threaten his other candidate who was wanted by the Chinese communists, to say we should turn him in over to them. And let the Chinese communists do what they will with him. I mean, that's unbelievable when you think about it. And again, it didn't make nearly as much of the scandal as it should have. Somebody mentioning the opium wars, and we want to go far enough back. Sure, drugs addiction, they've been used as means to mess with other cultures for centuries. But right now, the problem is the consumers of the drugs are all over the world, and in North America, we're dealing with it because fentanyl is killing young people here and older people. It's killing people all over the place in Canada, the United States. It's an epidemic. None of us have seen anything like this in our lifetime. And China is tied in with that. It's a part of it. And again, Sam covers that in his book. He's covered that in his most recent public posting from the Bureau there. But at the same time, we got to worry about paranoia and introversion. And that's what I worry about with some of this too. We really do have interference going on. We really do have some people being targeted and being pressured. But most of the Chinese population, by far, just want to take part in the economy and live peacefully and happily here like the rest of us. You know, one of the things is it's fantastic if you travel around. I worked in the oil field for 20 years. I lived in hotels and camps for all that time. One of the neat things is no matter where you go in North America, if you go to a town and it can only sustain one restaurant, it's 90% likely it's going to be run by a Chinese family. And hey, these things are important. If you're in a small prairie town that only has, say a gas station and, maybe a little hardware and one restaurant. I mean, having no restaurant sucks. Guys, you need a place to gather, to get together, to grab a meal, to do those things. And the only folks, the reasons, there's a few reasons that it tends to be run by Chinese people. I mean, the history of it's really fascinating. If you want to dig farther into it, a lot of it started kind of from the ones left, when the railroad was finished being built over 100 and some years ago, they spread across the prairies just trying to find places. They opened laundries and restaurants. But nobody else can run that tight. I owned a pub and restaurant for a while, and I tell you what, I mean, you're talking 5% margins. It's difficult. And in some small town, it's even worse. When you have a family and you see the families, they work their butts off. They got the kids serving tables after school, and they're working in the kitchen night and day, and they're doing the works there. They're great people. They're a part of the community. They take part. But they are still tightly connected back to China too. Not in the interference sense, but just that's the homeland. That's the way it goes. And they're valuable members of the community. But I finally asked one person, because his name was Jimmy, and the name of the restaurant was Jimmy's. And this Jimmy couldn't have been in his 30s, but he has a strong Chinese accent in a small town I was in. And the restaurant's called Jimmy's, but I knew that the restaurant had been called Jimmy's for probably since before I was born. So I said, look, how is it that this restaurant's, 80, 90 years old, you're running it and it's still named after your name, Jimmy? He says, well, no, I moved here with my family. I bought it off the last family that owned it. And I just changed my anglicized name when I got here to Jimmy, so it matches the restaurant. And the way it works for a lot of those families is he'll be here. He gets his kids educated in Canadian schools. They work very hard in the community. And then when it comes time to retire, he'll sell the restaurant off into another Chinese family who's coming over to get their foothold, to start in North America too, because I was kind of fascinated. It's a restaurant that's 100 years old. Why is that English is so, still a second language? Because you're a new Canadian. And that's not the case with every restaurant, but it's just a cool part of the prairies and small towns and part of our populations. And I think it strengthens us that these people coming out and working with us and joining our communities. So we got to watch when we talk about the bad side, the interference, the Chinese government, the Chinese communists. We've always got to remember that the vast majority of the Chinese people who came to Canada, they come here to make a life. They're coming to get away from the communists. They want no part of it. They want less of that than we do. So don't take out the frustration with the unchecked interference issues that are going on the Chinese population in general. That's wrong. That's not doing ourselves favors. It's certainly not doing the Chinese new Canadians any favors. What we got to get on to, of course, is our bloody politicians who are too chicken to take these issues on, too chicken to really dig into the interference issues, to the people being threatened, the Canadians, and these are Canadian citizens, even if they were Chinese origin, that are being threatened by Chinese communists here in Canada. This is outrageous. We aren't doing our job as a welcoming country if we can't protect people from the government they fled, and if our politicians don't have the courage to do it. So these things are important, and that's why Sam labeled his book Willful Blindness, because we've known about this. This has been going on for decades. There were reports in the 90s about this problem, but politicians are too chicken shit to take it on. And the ones suffering the most are a lot of the new Canadians, Chinese people who are here, fantastic citizens, and they're getting targeted and pushed and pressured around. Plus, yes, we got this stuff going on from India and God knows where else, because we won't control things within our own borders. We're too busy pointing at the crazy orange man south of the border and saying that's our biggest threat. Now, Trump's a pain in the ass, and he is crazy, but he's only going to be there a few more years. We've got bigger issues. This interference issue has been going on for decades, and we've really got to sort it out. All right, let's talk a little more about some domestic policy, though, and bring in Crystal Whitvrongel from the Montreal Economic Institute. And well, we could talk a little bit of energy. Thanks for joining us today, Crystal.
Thanks for having me.
So it's from a couple of weeks ago, but you put a piece out. We heard a little bit about it, and it kind of disappeared. But we're talking about C-69, the bill that's supposed to facilitate the construction of major industrial projects. We're not going to get rid of it by the sounds of it if the Liberals become reelected, anyways. And maybe not enough people understand that. I think the promises of expanding our domestic energy infrastructure are pretty hollow if we don't get rid of that bill.
Yeah, so really what we were talking about is the Impact Assessment Act, which is part of C-69 and it oversees the major infrastructure in this country, a lot of which is the energy stuff that has really been in the limelight lately, especially with all of the issues, tariffs and all of that talk. But really, there are very deep problems with the Impact Assessment Act. And we've looked at it at MEI for years, ever since it came in basically in 2019, and have been criticizing it along with other voices. And unless there are some big changes made, we're going to continue to see investment not made in Canada, projects not being built, jobs not being realized. And all of this at a time when, Canadian productivity is really in the dump. So we need to do something about it desperately.
And this act, this applies, we talk mostly about it in Alberta when it comes to oil and gas. And just to remind folks, you're with the Montreal Economic Institute, but you're Western based and cover a lot of issues out here. But this impacts a lot of things, mining projects, any large resource projects across the entire country.
Exactly. And so one of the problems with the Impact Assessment Act is there is a list of projects or thresholds rather that kind of dictate when you pass a certain threshold, the project will need to be subject to a federal review, or if it impacts areas of federal jurisdiction like fisheries and these sorts of things that seem fairly clear. So you can say, okay, my project will need a federal impact assessment. However, you can also have, whoever wanting to start a project that is designed within those thresholds where they think, I am within it, I don't need this federal impact assessment based on the way that it is outlined. And the minister can actually turn around and say, you know what, you do need it. So even if you design it within the confines of what is outlined, there still is the real risk of requiring one, which doesn't really do much for certainty, especially when we're talking investments in these huge sums of dollars.
Well, yeah, people have to understand. Even if you're a big company, you're playing a long game, and you're going to play the game of 4, 5, 6 years of applications and hearings and consultations and licensing and all that. There's no guarantee that you're going to get a thumbs up at the end. You could pour millions and millions of dollars into something and still never actually get it off the ground. I can't think of a better way to chill investment. Who in their right mind would commit themselves to something like that?
Exactly. And so, over the past decade, when investment has been increasing in other areas of the world in these areas, we've seen it decrease in Canada. And one of the issues is because of the Impact Assessment Act. Since it came in 2019, there's only been one single project that has successfully went through the entire process. And that took about 3.5 years. And that was facilitated in part because of what's called a substitution agreement, where the federal government with the British Columbia government has stated and has an agreement with them that if they are to do their assessments at the provincial level, the federal government recognizes that as being acceptable and meeting their needs. And so it really was that one project, one review that we're hearing about. That's what happened in that case. And so British Columbia is currently the only province that has an agreement with the federal government where they can take that route with their projects. So even if we see, a government who doesn't want to repeal or significantly reform the Impact Assessment Act, in the future here, we can only hope that we would see more of these substitution agreements, which is something that the Liberals have stated that they would look into with, a reformed Impact Assessment Act. And so, 3.5 years is how long that project took, and we can only hope that it speeds up for future projects as we need them desperately in this country.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think for the first time in, living memory, at least we have appetite across this country, a realization that we have to develop our domestic resources and our ability to get them to diverse markets. That's a win, sort of, but only if we make sure we're capable of developing and getting those resources to those markets. So, Mr. Carney has said he won't get rid of the act. But is there an ability, do you think, then to amend it, to change it? And I mean, it would have to be done relatively fast too, or it's not going to be any better than what we're stuck with.
Yeah, so I mean, ideally, when we see so many issues with something, it might be easier just to start from square one. But if that's not the route we go as a country, significant reform and amendment is needed and can be done. There are certain things that can be targeted. So, having these additional substitution agreements to cut down on some of the duplication and streamline some of the processing and regulatory burden behind that. That's one thing. And then having a little bit more certainty, as I was talking about earlier with the project list, or, if you're going to need a impact assessment, that's another area that can be amended. We can cut back on the scope of factors to be considered in an impact assessment, because that is a major issue. It went under the previous legislation from consideration of environmental factors and, health and social, these sorts of things, to a wide-ranging list, and really a list that kind of can go on and on. And so that has been one of the things that has chilled investment as well and can be targeted. So, I mean, ideally, we, have something new and fresh, but the current IAA can be amended in a very targeted manner to hopefully bring some of the certainty back to our economy in these areas of major investment.
Well, and part of the role of the federal government, I mean, I it's kind of debatable where it sits, but they should be there actually to facilitate projects that cross provincial borders. That's kind of the role of a federal government rather than hindering it. In fact, they should sometimes, though I can't imagine seeing it, almost be able to put their foot down sometimes when one province is hindering a neighboring province on some sort of development and say, I'm sorry, but constitutionally you can't do that. This project has to go. Can something like that be built into the act? I mean, pointing out like this is the final authority on this project?
I mean, I know that there's been some discussion on national interest designations and these sorts of topics within the context of the IAA. But when it comes to it, really, natural resource development and resource development is a provincial jurisdiction, and that needs to be respected. So any discussions of that manner really need to keep that in account. And, on the other side of that, the federal government has been criticized for overdoing it and stepping into areas of provincial jurisdiction, which is why the IAA was amended last year, but also is still open to further future legal challenges, because some critics do state it still is unconstitutional in that it steps into these areas of provincial jurisdiction. So there's definitely a balance that needs to be struck, but it is the provinces that have the jurisdiction with that regard.
With regard to the project itself, but if it's a project that crosses provincial borders, then it becomes federal, like a energy transmission line or a pipeline or a highway for that matter. I mean, again, you don't want to fight with the province if you can avoid it, but at the same time, if a province said, you know what, no, I'm not allowing that highway through here anymore, I know the government would step in and say, well, that's unfortunate, but you can't do that. But they seem to allow the provinces to have a veto when it comes to pipelines. They're kind of selective on where they want to head. Die on hills when it comes to that.
Yeah, definitely. That one's a lot more political, and I don't expect that to change in the future in terms of the politics surrounding especially pipelines in certain provinces. But we will be watching to see with whatever future government does come in, what happens with that and how that is handled.
So the Conservatives have vowed to get rid of and repeal C-69, the Impact Assessment Act. Presumably, though, something will replace it. What would you like to see then in a new? I mean, something does have to be there. We need some degree of regulation. We want to minimize it, but what should be put in place then?
if we were going back to basics of essentially an environmental assessment and what's needed to prevent environmental damage and to protect the environment, that should be sort of at the forefront of any sort of new legislation, and building on previous legislation, but in ways that take into account current context. So for instance, if we are looking at a parcel of land that has already been developed in some way, if we're adding an additional thing to it, so say we're adding twinning a pipeline, for instance, should that need to undergo a brand new impact assessment, or can that be a smaller, simpler process? So a new environmental assessment act of whatever it would be titled could take things like that into account, but it would need to be up and running quickly, especially from the investment certainty standpoint, because without one, or without any sort of certainty in that regard, that doesn't do much for investment certainty either, which we see a lot of waffling about when it comes to this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's quite an issue going on with that. What about, I guess you'd want to avoid duplication. That's something else too. I mean, the province is making the same demands as the federal government. I mean, the environment's the same darn thing, whether it's a federal study or a provincial study for that matter. But I mean, it'd just be tough. You want to get fast with it, then I guess if you're bringing in this new act, I mean, the government can be as slow in bringing in legislation as they are in utilizing that legislation to get projects done.
Exactly, and the opposition to it and what that has to look like, and taking public interest into consideration and those sorts of things. Like it's a very complicated scenario sort of either way, but as we started off in this conversation about the potential to reform or amend the Impact Assessment Act, Carney has been on the record saying that would give more certainty, rather than having a brand new piece of legislation that's open to legal challenges. But I think it needs to be, reiterated that the current IAA does need significant amendment in order to avoid further legal challenge on its own. And that's something that top legal firms across the country have been saying since the previous amendments. So we need to make sure to get it right this time, whichever way we go with it as a country.
Yeah, well, I believe there was a ruling against that act, basically saying it was in violation of the Constitution. But it does seem that, I don't know, that's a larger discussion in Canada. We can have our senior court saying, you're right, this is against the Constitution. And the government says, oh, that's a shame. Well, we're going full of steam ahead anyhow. And there's not really a heck of a lot we can do about it.
Yeah, and so I believe the Alberta government has already challenged again. And we're going to see more of that, but also we're going to see some changes with whatever government comes in the near future here too. So, I know that I'm watching and feel quite nervous about it. And I'm not a major investor, so I can only imagine what that would look like from an investment standpoint, when I'm feeling this way as just, your everyday regular Calgarian.
Yeah, I mean, we just need all they want to see is a framework. Here it is, steps A to Z. These are all the check marks you need to fill, but a good assurance that once you get to Z, we promise you we'll let you start moving dirt. And we don't quite have that confidence ability yet.
Exactly. And that is one of the big problems. And, I could go into more. I know we're running short of time here, so I won't go too far, but there are other things within the IAA that really make it give the potential for further delays in the process when it comes to politics versus policy, for instance, that the minister can delay some of these timelines, which are legislated timelines. So a new IAA should have that be really bulletproof, if you will, or a new piece of legislation where, a legislated timeline is a timeline. And that needs to be respected. Obviously, there needs to be flexibility for certain considerations, but for the most part, this is a huge problem, and we need to look at that as well.
Yeah, well, you don't want to. The other thing that could happen if the timeline is too long is you can get a government change and a rug pull happen to you when you're partway through. We saw that with Keystone, where they've batted it back and forth. Oh, look at that. President Trump said we could do it, and we've built it to each side. And then Biden came in and he said, no, we're shutting it down. And those lawsuits failed from TCPL too. I mean, they just basically said, "Oh, sorry, you're on the hook for a couple $1 billion. It's a shame."
And that's a huge hit to potential investment, because these are long-term projects. Like, they take many years to build and get up and get running. And so if the regulatory process is also 5 to 7 to 10 years, we will see multiple changes of government, at the provincial level and at the federal level over that time span. So it's not doing much for people wanting to, or companies wanting to step into that space.
The bottom line is we most definitely just got to speed it up one way or another. Even if a more fast track thumbs down, at least then they know what they're pursuing, and they can quit wasting time on it and move on to something else. Well, let's see. Hope for the best. As you said, we're kind of nervous going forward, seeing where they're going with this. It seems more like Mr. Carney recognizes that it's a problem, but he doesn't seem that eager to deal with it. We'll see, I guess, the day after the election. We don't know who the prime minister is going to be after Monday anyways, but well, that's one of the things that we hope that stays on the priority no matter who the government is, because we just got to get this stuff done. So I appreciate the work you guys do with the Montreal Economic Institute and keeping these issues alive and giving some good reports on it. Yeah, I know you guys write on healthcare and a lot of great things as well. So before I let you go, where can people find your stuff and keep up with you?
Our website is www.iedm.org, and we do have offices in Montreal, Calgary, and Ottawa. So MEI is where you can find us.
Great. Well, thank you again. I always appreciate it when you come on. It's just a nice breather of common sense. So I'll let you get back into work. I'm sure you've got some data to dig into and translate for the rest of us there on the next reports coming out. So thanks again, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks for having me. All
right. So again, guys, yes, Crystal Whitvrongel, and look it up, the Montreal Economic Institute. Again, it's almost a misnomer. Some Albertans worry that it's an Eastern-based organization or something like that. As she said at the end, no, they got offices all across the country, and they really put out some good stuff. Those think tanks, there's where you can get the tall foreheads working on things, and as I said, they can dig into the data, compress it into something more palatable for us and digestible, and then we can get the summary. And as they've been pointing out, as Crystal has, that act, that Impact Assessment Act, we've always called it in Alberta the anti-pipeline bill, because it really is built to hinder, a more courageous thing on Trudeau's part. I'm going to mention that jerk's name. He's been out of sight, but the damage he's caused is far from gone, and his little gang is still there in Ottawa. That bill was meant to kill oil and gas development. It always was. Justin Trudeau always had that as his ideal. He was said it over and over years ago. We want to phase out the oil sands. We want to phase out oil and gas. And he didn't have the balls to come up and just say, we're going to ban it, which I'm glad he didn't do that. But this is a backdoor way. We won't ban it. We will just make so much paperwork and garbage and trash and regulations that nobody will dare invest in it. And it worked. As Crystal said, only one thing has gotten done over the years since that thing came in. And it's hard. Joe Mills saying certain provinces have stood in the way of developing theirs and leached off others. Yes, and I know which certain province you're talking about, Joe. This is where we get a tough balance. I've had those discussions online. I'm very much big on having provincial independence, provincial authority, provincial sovereignty as much whenever possible. But, and this is where we come to it, and that's where I, as an independent supporter, start questioning the point of a federation. The point of a federation is to have some overriding rules, though, that make it that you can all work to each other's benefit. It means that, as I was saying to Crystal, you can't stop a railway, you can't stop a pipeline, you can't stop a highway, because a province, that's federal jurisdiction. The feds are there to just make sure that the goods and services can flow across the country. But they lose their balls whenever it comes to Quebec, because Quebec says we won't allow the pipeline. Now, constitutionally, Quebec has no bloody ability to do that. None. Zero. None. A government with courage, and we won't get one, conservative or liberal, when it comes to that, because nobody stands up to Quebec. A government with courage will say, that's too bad. That's a shame. but you can't stop it. It's not part of being within the Federation. Instead, to say, well, we can't do it because Quebec won't let us. Another area, and this is something in our developments, and we've got to start straightening some stuff out on, is the Indigenous Authority. Now, if we got a project that's on Indigenous land, if it's on a reserve, crosses a reserve, or somehow directly impacts a reserve, okay, it's pretty important that we if it's, especially if it's on their land itself, they got a veto. That's different. That's on their land. But we've gotten to this point now where we're pretending there's a veto authority for Indigenous groups on everything, everywhere, all the time. And that's a bunch of bullshit. They aren't sovereign nations. That's bullshit too. These land acknowledgements are bullshit. We're trying to build these nations within nations, and when they aren't, they're dependencies, and they're dysfunctional dependencies. And we have screwed up with this constitutional requirement to consult. Remember the word consult Indigenous groups when we want to get things done. Doesn't mean we need consent. It both starts with C. Big difference in meaning, though. I think to be respectful, anything within potential impact of somebody, you should, of course, consult. You should talk about how it's going to impact that area, how you can make things run as smoothly as possible. But if at the end of it, they still say, well, no, I don't like it, then you say, too friggin' bad. Sorry, sucks to be you. It's going anyway. We consulted. We tried. The Trans Mountain Twinning is a huge example of that. It, for the most part, that thing was built in the 50s. We were talking about expanding a pipe 20 feet over and putting in one right next to it. Not even a new pipe. And it took years. The permits came in at the thousands. I remember writing a column on that years ago when Kinder Morgan was still trying to do it. And we're talking 1,600 permits just in BC alone on things, which have an expiry date. And here's some of the irony. You might finally get through all of them, find out the first ones you started on expired, and then you got to start that process again. We've got to get realistic. Kenzie Kraken saying adding First Nation consultation to everything is mostly unhelpful. And it's true. I mean, we shouldn't be at a point where there's zero, but we got to quit pretending that all these different groups have a veto authority. They don't. And we will never get anything done in this country until we accept that. If we want to talk about First Nations being sovereign nations, let's talk about it. Fine. Have your own taxation power, have your own passports, have your own currency, have your own military, have your own trade agreements with other countries. That's what a sovereign nation is. What First Nations are this weird hybrid thing we built under the Indian Act with the reserve system. It's failing catastrophically. They're living in squalor and misery. I've been doing videos showing that lately. They sure don't like that being exposed, do they? By the way, yeah, I've got the Canadian Charter Advocates. I really strongly suggest have a check those guys out. They're fantastic. They're helping me out. They're taking that on because, yes, the Siksika Reserve has actually tried to fine me $2,000 for shooting video on the reserve, exposing how bad this sovereign nation is failing. This sovereign nation of Siksika got $1.2 billion from Trudeau a few years ago, and the houses are falling apart. The addiction rates are through the roof. The crime is through the roof. There's no industries being developed on there to speak of. And then we just keep perpetuating this illusion as if we're this nation that has these hundreds of little sovereign nations within it that are all functioning little happy little elves out there within amongst us, and everybody's getting along fine. No, it's a bizarre sub-government creation we've made, and it's not serving anybody. When will it get to a point when a government has the courage to take on Indigenous groups and Quebec? I don't know. That's where we get back to. I got a feeling we're going to be talking a lot about that after Monday. It's probably going to be a lot of provincial independence talk because it's time for a new system. And there's only one way to get a new system, and that's breaking out of the last system. And that's one of those independence talks that people talk about too. Well, you'll never be able to break a province out without Indigenous permission. Really? Where? Where was it written that I have to get their permission? Alberta citizens who happen to be Indigenous would have just as much right to vote in a referendum as anybody else, as they should. That's about it. There's no other part that says that their permission is required. The treaties are still there. Fine. The boundaries of the reserves are still there. The Indian Act? That's legislation, guys. Legislation. Most of the things people keep assuming are treaty rights or charter rights are actually just packed into the Indian Act. Even the name itself tells you how out of date that act is. call people Indians anymore unless they're from India. But we can't even update the name of the act, much less the content of it. Here's an irony. If you want to look something up, after the show, of course, you can listen to this first. But look up the white paper. It may be poorly named, but it was in the late 60s. It was written by Indian Affairs Minister of that time, Jean Chrétien, under the authority of Pierre Trudeau. And it's a brilliant paper. It was something that was going to work things towards the end. It was something that was showing even then, even over 50 years ago, they realized this system is failing. It's failing the First Nations people. It's failing the Indigenous people. It's dead end. It's going badly. It's going poorly. We need to start phasing people out of it. We need to have permanent settlements and get out of this, and everybody can get together. It was a fantastic piece of work. It was respectfully written, even if it was in the old language. But unfortunately, the parasites in the bureaucracy and in bad administrations and the lawyers who make a fortune out of this lit their hair on fire. The pressure came on, and Trudeau and Chrétien backed off. You know what? It would have been the best thing Pierre Trudeau ever bloody did if he'd have followed through on what he'd started. Everybody should read the white paper. Look it up online that Pierre Trudeau wrote with Jean Chrétien back then. Because I tell you what, things would be so much better for everybody today if that thing had passed, if that had gone through. Would it have been magical? Would it have been easy? Would there have been failures here and there? Would there have been challenges? Of course there would. But it had long-term thinking, because the one thing that's lacking in Indigenous affairs is long-term thinking. I keep asking that. I keep saying that in those videos that they're all pissed off at me about creating. Because I keep asking people, what do you see here in 10 years? What do you see here in 20, 50, 100 years on this reserve? I show the images of a reserve. I show the wild dogs, the dilapidated houses, the high crime, the lack of resources. So what is your vision? How is this possibly going to be better 30 years from now? And these are the ones down south. Look at some of the northern ones. Look at a map. Google Maps is wonderful. And look at some of the places we've got people living in. And ask yourself, how are they going to be in 50 years, 100 years in those spots? Why are we keeping them there if there's no resources? Really, seriously, in the modern world, when they're dying 20 years younger than the rest of us. Yeah, that's what's happening. 19 years, actually. But the average Indigenous man in Alberta dies 19 years younger than the average non-Indigenous person. That alone should tell you how badly the system is failing, yet we're not supposed to talk about it. We want to live in this little illusion of these little sovereign nations that are functioning. They aren't functioning, guys. They're dependencies, and they're miserable, and they're in a terrible spot. Subdog saying most of the problem with the bans are the corruption, and there's a lot of corruption happening within the bans, but also the fact is, even if it's a non-corrupted band, what do you do? What do you do if you're the Whitefish band? You're up there out north of the Little Slave Lake, and the Lesser Slave Lake, I should say. And you've got very few resources around, a small population, it's dysfunctional, in a lot of trouble. Your only resource, your revenue, is nothing but government, a little bit of oil and gas revenue. There's not much you can do. The people are in this half in one world and half in the other, and not doing well in either of them. Subdog saying the reserves are meant to keep the traditions, not the modern. But you know what? Even if that was the truth, it's failing, isn't it? Because you go on the reserve and you're not seeing a lot of traditional living, which it would be ridiculous to expect people to. They're not living in teepees anymore and in subsistence hunting. That's just not part of it. The world moved ahead, and it should and has to. But is that what people envision? I kind of wonder that with downtown, urban dwelling liberals, or not. It's not just liberals, but just people who think that it's a sustainable system. And they have this romanticized version in their head of these noble little Indians running around living traditionally off the land in these reserves. That's why I'm going out and doing videos of them, because people, you don't know what these reserves are like. It's not turning out like that. And what is it? What, your little vanity? You think it's your feel-good project in the world? You got a little, it's like a zoo. Yeah, a little zoo. And look at that. We can go study this group of people that didn't advance over the last 100 years because we created a reserve and they can stay traditional. But they didn't. Unfortunately, they didn't have to deal with fentanyl 100 some years ago. But I had a commenter on one of my videos who got very upset, saying, "Oh, it's you guys' fault, us and them, the usual divisions of this and so on." And he was talking about how everything he really was saying was brilliant and wonderful when they were in teepees before the nasty settlers came along and everything. Guys, these were nomadic people living a really rough ass life, short typically, and they were warring with each other. Every society had that at certain degrees in their evolution. And it's nothing to fault the people of today with. No, but do you really want to go back to that? Really? Come on, let's get serious here. Let's get serious. As bad as things are in the reserves, they're a hell of a lot better than they were 200 years ago. And we can't turn the clock back. Nobody really wants to. And spare me this romanticized, again, fictional vision of what people thought, that it was some sort of Disney thing where they were just, running around with Bambi and the flowers and the skunk and Thumper and living this little natural cartoon world before Europeans came along and just made life hell on earth. It was a tough go. We got to start looking reality. I've talked about this before. I talk about policy. We need to base policy on the outcomes, not the intent. We got to look at what's actually working or what's not, because I don't give a shit what you think it's supposed to do. If it's not working, you stop doing it, because the intentions aren't worth a piss hole drilled in a snowbank. I'm just using those words while I can. I've got this special show on Fridays that doesn't get put out to the cable channel, so I can use some of those words. But I mean, don't worry, I'm not going to go off on a blistering tirade of obscenities, but at least it allows me to vent and express myself a little more on that. Okay, let's turn the channel a little bit and bring Jared Yager in, and he's coming in from BC. He's our guy out there. He's been covering this election for the last month like everybody else. How you doing, Jared?
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
I'm all right. Ranting, raving, pissing, moaning, the usual stuff out of me, but that's what I do. So you're in a very interesting place for this election. I've said that before. I mean, BC's really got some of the most swing ridings going on in the country. They always kind of do in the lower mainland, and I don't think this election's been any exception, has it?
No, and it's really interesting because there's an added dimension to it, because we have two of the federal party leaders here in BC. And this time around, it's not just a question of how well their party will do, but whether it will survive. And if they will survive, not only being the party leaders, but also their seats. Both Elizabeth May over Saanich Gulf Islands and Jagmeet Singh in the new riding of Burnaby Central. Nobody's really sure if they're going to be able to pull through and win those ridings, or if they're going to be taken over by the Conservatives or even the Liberals.
It would almost, be a mercy to Jagmeet Singh at this point if the things come along the way the polls are indicating. If it turns out that the NDP is just a shell of a party, and it's time to find a new leader, it's kind of easier to ride off into the sunset if you're still not a member of parliament and have to maintain your seat. You can just kind of, shuffle away and let the party start working on rebuilding itself. I mean, I don't think he wants to throw his riding, but I don't think the worst thing that could happen to him personally at this point is losing his seat.
Yeah. He's still campaigning out there, and over in Burnaby, he still had some support. So I'm not sure. Yeah, it's really a toss-up right now.
Yeah, you can't count anything out. I just envision, again, if he won his seat, but it's one of 5 NDP seats or something, it's going to be a stressful place to be in that first session of Parliament, and I imagine there'd be a lot of pressure on him to let somebody else take the reins for a while.
Yeah, and BC has long been a NDP stronghold. That's where they have most of their support. And this time around, according to the latest 338 Canada projections, there's only one riding in the entire province that's safe for the NDP. All the others that they held the last time around are toss-ups, or they've switched to likely for the Conservatives or the Liberals. So it's looking more like a 2-horse race over here.
Yeah, and that's been a lot across the country to a degree. With the Conservatives, I mean, one of the areas I would think, I mean, the lower mainland's a tough nut to crack. It's a volatile area, but it's also been an area where the two big conservative issues that they used to own were really resonating, which is housing affordability and crime. But I mean, is that helping them? It must be helping them to some degree in Vancouver and area right now still.
So in the lower mainland, obviously you have downtown Vancouver and that area, which is more more liberal. You know, Hedy Fry, she's been the MP for Vancouver Centre since before I was born. So
And she's
we'll
crazy.
see what happens there. Yeah. And the NDP candidate Avi Lewis, he's gaining some ground. Like he's been out every single day talking to voters. So I think if there's a chance for the Liberals to lose a seat in the Vancouver area, it would be here in Vancouver Centre to the NDP. But elsewhere in the Lower Mainland, the further east you go, that's where you see the more conservative areas. And in out closer to the Fraser Valley, that's conservative territory. But Pierre, he's done well trying to connect with voters in Richmond, especially with the Chinese community, who have been very outspoken on issues that Pierre has also talked about. And so whether that pays off, we'll see. But he's definitely trying to bring more people in the Vancouver area into the conservative fold.
Did you say Avi Lewis is running against Hedy Fry?
Yes.
Okay, well that's interesting. Getting back to a bit of your youth and a little of the history of things. And yeah, Hedy Fry's been in there forever. She pulled off that stunt saying they were burning crosses up in Prince George back in the 90s. And yeah, she's a special piece of work, that one. But Avi Lewis, speaking of NDP pedigree, his father, I believe, is Stephen Lewis, who was one of the main founders of the NDP in the past. Boy, if he won, he would be sort of a natural person to kind of start looking towards to rebuild that party, wouldn't he?
Yeah. And I've spoken with him a few times now. And that's kind of the sense I'm getting, is that he wants to see the party go in a new direction. And I mean, it's pretty obvious that Jagmeet Singh is not going to be leader for much longer. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe Lewis can rebuild a party that is, for all intents and purposes, dead.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. He's just very much an unapologetic socialist. I mean, a pure blood NDPer. I just didn't even know he was running. I find I don't like the thought of him getting too close to power, but it certainly adds a new interest to looking at the future of the NDP, because people will be saying who would be leading next. But I could certainly see Avi as a natural candidate to try and take that on and start rebuilding.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And then we're really starting to get into legacies in Canada. I mean, we had Pierre Trudeau goes down to Justin Trudeau. We have Stephen Lewis and Avi Lewis. And, Ben Mulroney's been pretty outspoken this last couple of years, too. You got to wonder if he doesn't have his eyes towards a political future as well. We might just...
you never know.
I'm kind of mixed on that. I find it neat for trivia, but I'm not sure if political dynasties are good for democracy.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So... getting on Vancouver Island, that's another, just neat kind of mix and everything. And Aaron Gunn, if you look at some of the polling and everything, he's looking pretty comfortable to potentially win a seat, even though there's been a lot of people screaming that he shouldn't be in the race.
Oh, definitely. And we saw there was a protest a couple weeks ago now of mostly NDP supporters who went to his office and basically voiced their opinion about why they think he shouldn't be in. But I think most of the people up in that area of the island, they're kind of fed up with how things have been over the past few years, and we saw that in the provincial election as well, where that that area went blue. So Aaron Gunn, he's really stuck to his guns and not succumbed to all the pressure. And Pierre, he's actually holding a rally tonight up in that area, so I think he's really going for that.
Which will be interesting. I mean, and Aaron's history in the provincial politics was led to, there's a whole different hornet's nest we'll talk a lot more about after the federal run, but, his disqualification from the leadership of the BC United Party was kind of one of the catalysts that led to the end of that party, I believe, in some ways. But he's going to be an outspoken voice within the Conservative caucus, whether it's a government caucus or an opposition one. There'll still be people pretty upset with his presence even, and it's going to be something for Mr. Polyv to deal with after the election.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm sure it'd be interesting to see him in the House of Commons.
Yeah.
After years being outspoken on all these issues.
And he's not as controversial as the nutcases opposing him make it out to be. I mean, Aaron's a smart guy who hits on some really good points. I'm looking forward to seeing him with a seat. I'd prefer to see it in the government seat, perhaps, but I guess time will tell on that. What about internal, interior and northern BC? It's mostly pretty solidly conservative still at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's pretty firmly in the Conservatives' grasp. I would say one riding that I'm really looking at is Abbotsford South Langley, and what happened there is you have veteran politician Mike de Jong. He was seeking the Conservative nomination, and then the party said, "No, we don't want you," and they picked someone else who is a local farmer with not too much political experience. And instead of just dropping out, de Jong, he's going to run as an independent. And some of the polls from that riding show that voters still prefer him. So I don't know if the Conservatives kind of shot themselves in the foot there by not allowing de Jong to run, but it looks like we could have an independent coming out on top in that riding.
Yeah, and that's pretty rare in the Canadian system, and it's usually somebody who had a falling out with a party. Federally, I'm thinking the Liberals had John Nunziata. He had a big falling out with them and left cabinet. That was out east, and he won, I think, 2 elections after that as an independent. I could be wrong. I know he won at least one, but outside of that, independents winning are a pretty rare outcome. But do you think the blood would be so bad that he would stay as an independent afterwards, or perhaps maybe after an election they would, make up their differences and come back together?
I don't know. He felt kind of betrayed by the party, so it'd probably take a lot for him to come back in after all that.
It's true enough. I mean, it's one of the most divisive areas for people who've played within politics is the party politics when it comes to nominations. Is where you get some of the backroom crap going on, and when you've got members who work their butts off to get somebody nominated to represent them, and then somebody higher up in the party says, "Yeah, we're going to put this person in over here." And every party does it, and it rarely ends well. It's just something that I think inside players can't resist themselves, and but it'll be an interesting one to watch that night for sure. So I've heard we're trying to get you into the cover things at the NDP headquarters on Monday. How have things been progressing with that?
Well, I have yet to hear back. Every time I try to RSVP for an NDP event here in the Lower Mainland, I don't hear anything back. So we'll see.
Well, there's ways and there's ways. I'm certain if a person's persistent and tries to figure, you could probably find your way in there. I mean, barring that, what are you going to be covering in this last few days of the campaign now?
So Pierre Polyv, he's going to be back in the Lower Mainland tomorrow. So he's got his rally on the island tonight, and then another one tomorrow in Delta. So I'll be covering that one last final push here in BC, and then he heads back off to the east. But it's been really nice to see all the party leaders spend more time, I feel, than usual here in BC, because they realize, this isn't, with the collapse of the NDP, like this is kind of up for grabs. And so both the Liberals and the Conservatives have been spending a lot of time here. Carney, he was here yesterday and then made his way out east. But
I mean, being unpredictable makes you garner attention at least. I mean, that's one of the things Alberta does that doesn't do themselves any favors. Pierre Polyv is starting a rally here in half an hour, and that'll be his first appearance in Alberta for the whole campaign. I mean, this is a Conservative stronghold, but the reason is, well, you pretty much know that you got most of the province in the bag. They're going to focus in the areas that have more swing in them. And BC, as you said, is getting a lot of attention because, boy, you've got a whole lot of ridings that are a little too close to call right now. Yeah,
for sure.
All right. Well, before I let you get going, then let's get a prediction out of you before Monday comes. Hey, it doesn't have to be partisan, but where are you thinking things sit?
I would say, I don't know, there's enough appetite for change, I think, here in BC that we will see, not just on the Conservative side, but across the board. So I think we'll see the Conservatives make gains on Vancouver Island and in certain parts of the Lower Mainland. And I feel like the NDP, they're really not going to do so well this time around. The only upset I see is maybe Avi Lewis winning here in Vancouver Centre and unseating Hedy Fry. But yeah, I think it'll really come down to the Conservatives and the Liberals, where they can find the most support.
Right on. Well, I'll let you get back to it. Thanks for coming in to give us an update, and I'm sure we'll be checking in with you a few times over the course of Monday night.
No, for sure. Yeah, thank you.
Right on. Thanks. So, yes, that is our BC man on the ground, Jared Yager. And yeah, by the way, if you remember, he did some of those great videos during those crazed Hamas protests out in Vancouver and things. It's not just the political races. He's been focused on that. We all have been a lot in this last month. Of course, it only makes sense, but he's busy hitting things out there and getting content all the time. Just that reminder again, guys, subscribe. That's the way we pay those bills and get guys like Jared out there to cover this stuff for us. It's so, so important. Some of that talk, we're seeing that discussion online with, why we should fund the CBC or why we should have funding for local journalism. Look, guys, it should be up to us, not the government, to do it. And the way we can do it, subscribing to places like us, westernstandard.news/subscription, so we can keep funding and keeping those reporters in those spots on the ground across there. Not asking the government to do it. Then you just get more CBC. You don't need more of that crap. Doesn't do you any good. Let's see. So, Sandy saying there was a rally in Nisku with 10,000 people. With Polyv. Yes, no, I know. I believe, I could be wrong though. I could be corrected. I believe that was before the election was called though. It was massive, but it was before. Could be wrong in that though. But he hasn't been here a heck of a lot. And it was a massive, massive rally though. And people were dismissing it. You know what? I think that was during the campaign. So I could be wrong on that one for when it landed. But he hasn't been here a lot, which is fine. You're the leader. You got, 30 some days to try and convince as many people as possible to vote for your party. And strategically, Kenzie's saying it was only 2 weeks ago. Okay, I don't know. Everything drags out. Well, that's why I like these live shows. And people can correct me as it goes. So thank you for the correction, guys. Rock Girl as well, 2 weeks ago. See, my timelines are all scrambled. I was wrong. There, make a note of that one. I know Jane always makes a note in her book when I admit that I'm wrong. It happens sometimes. So thank you. He has been out here, and it was just a couple weeks ago, and it was a big rally. And the other one's starting in half an hour. We've got Sean Polzer on the ground at the Calgary one, or he's trying to. Oh, yes. Okay. So we're just getting an update from that. Sean's having difficulty getting through because of internet problems. This is something that happened. And this happens at come on. Vamp Fashion saying Cory is old. Hey, come on. I'm not at the point of getting senile yet. I'm only 54. Give me a little more time but I guess some of the things aren't firing as well as they can. Sean's trying to get through, but I know I see him down there. Let's see if we can't get him. We'll give it a crack, and if the coverage isn't good enough, we'll move on. Sean, how you doing? Are you hearing us there?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Cory?
Yeah, you're coming in pretty good, actually. A little bit breezy. So does it look like a crazy turnout of folks out there already, or what?
There's a crazy turnout of probably about 3,000 people. They're just saying that the building holds probably about 4, and it's pretty good and full. We had to come out because we're so bad. But I've been trying to look in. It's crazy. We got bagpipers. We got it's a real festive atmosphere. The plane is pulled up. He's just waiting, but we're expecting to show up anytime here. I don't know if he's going to stick to the script and be on time, or if he's going to come out earlier. But
okay, yeah. So getting a bit of a racket there. It's a little difficult, but all the same. How about protesters? You got any clowns out there trying to make problems, or is it all just supporters that you can find?
It's pretty much all supporters. There's no real protests or anything. A couple people got turned away, but they're kind of more like the alt-right media. You have to kind of register, you know what I mean? Like, you got to be pretty far out on the fringe to get turned away from here. But, there's been a couple.
So they're not giving the Western Standard any difficulties with access or anything so far then?
We're celebrities. I'm being treated like gold here.
Well, you can, I mean, you're just
on the podium, and it's like...
Because I'll piss everybody off at some point.
No, I'm trying not to, especially not the police. The police, I don't know. Here, maybe we could do a quick pan.
Sure. Yeah, maybe give me a quick shot.
Crowd behind me, but so his plane is, I don't know. Yeah, he's come up there, and the people are all just going in through the door over there.
Okay, it doesn't look that big from that angle, but I've heard that before too.
Well, this parking lot was packed like about half an hour ago. It was completely packed.
Yeah,
But yeah, we
they're
have to
already-
come out because I don't know if they've got blockers. I've never had good luck with cell reception inside an airplane hangar. So
yeah, well, I think part of it we dealt with that at the. Oh, that's all right. I'll let you get back in there and cover them then. Yeah, so I appreciate the update, and we'll be streaming that from here.
We were hoping. Yeah, I think you're gonna have to take the party feed. We were gonna try to stream it, but there's no way the connection's gonna be strong enough to be able to. So, but yeah, it's packed in there. It's like a rock concert. Not quite the Stones, but I would say like Billie Holiday.
Oh, okay. Well, next best thing.
It's not Taylor Swift. It's not quite Taylor. Yeah. Okay. Talk to you later, Cory. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, Sean. So yeah, this is Sean Pulser, and as you said, yeah, like this is something that we've had happening. And when I went to the UCP AGM, and we didn't buy the right connections and whatnot, but the reality is you get thousands of people in one spot. And everybody's got their phones going at the same time, and they're all hitting things at the same time, and they overload the local tower, and you've got next to nothing for coverage. So, but it sounds like, again, that a whole lot of people are showing up and going out there. And, quite a schedule, because he was in Saskatoon this morning. He's doing that, and then he's going to be in BC tonight. So they're just bouncing around. I mean, whatever happens for Polyv and all of them after this campaign is we know they're going to sleep for a week. Anybody who's ever actually worked full time on a campaign, I tell you, it's a workout. It's just exhausting. I managed a couple provincially, and it just sucks everything out of you. If you're taking it seriously, you're on the clock every day. I mean, you might not be door knocking day and night and everything, but you're always doing something. And if you aren't doing it, you're always thinking about it. It was almost like when I owned that bloody restaurant. You just don't get away from it. So everybody's on the home stretch now. They're pretty tired, and no matter which team they're on, and they're going to be running hard for this last bit. I still had to laugh a bit. Yeah, Avi Lewis, boy, I didn't realize he's. I guess I don't watch NDP closely enough, and in BC it's a bigger name. But as I said, he's NDP royalty as far as the family goes. We saw Rachel Notley; her father was the Grant Notley who ran the NDP in Alberta too. We're really seeing family dynasties starting to pop up in Canadian politics. And Avi Lewis used to have a show on CBC, of course, and he's just been a far left sort of person, but he's out there. Interesting to hear of some media being turned away. Now, here's something that's been mixed, and I understand being careful, but the Conservatives, all of them, every party, but the Conservatives have been tight with allowing media access as well. We've been trying. And I mean, they're fearful, of course. I mean, there's the reality of today. You get one misstatement, one thing taken out of context, one whatever, and suddenly it dominates the social media and the news for days, and you lose days of campaigning because you're doing damage control. But at the same time, if you spend 38 days of pretty much saying nothing, you don't gain a lot of ground either. So people forget that we should have, for every party, 300 and some individual candidates running. But when you keep them all shielded from media statements or talking to them, and they can put out nothing besides, written canned sound bites, people don't necessarily embrace your team. They got to get to know the candidates. They got to get to know the party. It's tough. It's a balancing act, but the balance with media, independent media even, and Polyv did a podcast a few days ago. I know you can only do so much. You can't be on every appearance, every show and give time to everything. But at the same time, you can't be hiding from them all the time either. What was it I heard with the Saskatoon one? He only took 4 questions. This was just today. He took 4 questions from media, and 2 of them were in French in Saskatoon. We want to hear more, guys. Don't be so afraid of failing. In fact, if you aren't garnering traction in the campaign, then perhaps you should be taking some chances. Just go for it. Let some of your more vocal candidates speak a bit. We'll see. I mean, it's easy to armchair quarterback, but it's getting pretty scary. It's Kenzie saying he always only takes 4. Well, that's too few. He shouldn't always only take 4. He should take more. He really should. And, Carney's guilty of it. They're all guilty of it, but too damn bad. You're in the big boy chair. You got to take the questions. You got to be able to answer them. And if anything, and it's been frustrating to watch because people saying, oh, Polyv speaks in nothing but sound bites. They got no policy. They got no policy. No, there's a lot of policy, actually. And if you dig into it and everything. But at the same time, he does fall back on those little sound bites all the time. And again, I think that it breeds a little bit of distrust. When it's as bad as when Trudeau, rather than going to a theme or a soundbite, he would just give you a big, long, rambling word salad and never actually say anything. And it made most of us learn to loathe him. But likewise, if you just keep going to Axe the Tax and you know, Hug a Thug and all of those little catchy themes, well, it doesn't help for people thinking that they're connecting or getting trust with the candidate either. So, but yeah, you know, it'll be one of the things building. I mean, we've had a perfect storm that made things difficult for the Conservatives on all levels. Trump was a factor that came out of nowhere. And the Liberals effectively had just kept smearing the Conservatives as if they were to be associated with Trump. And even if you do like Trump, well, you got to understand most Canadians don't. So if your party becomes associated with somebody or something that most Canadians don't like, it's not good for you in the campaign. The other part was Singh. I mean, he's just tanked the NDP, and he's been terrible for years with the NDP. But it became even worse. Now it's only the hardcore of the hardcore. And the Conservatives, I mean, they never would win elections with, 60% support or something. They always get, if they were going to win government, they relied on the NDP or the Bloc or somebody taking a bite out of the Liberal votes. The Bloc has been suffering too. Same thing, because when you get an external threat, which Donald Trump presented to them, well, Quebec voters used to be more independence-minded. They now rallied around the Liberals because they wanted to feel, well, we got to be a little stronger as Canadians right now. And that, again, served the Liberals really well. So the Conservatives just had a bad time no matter what they did. Vamp Fashion saying, we don't need lib shill media questions. Let them talk to the people. I don't like a lot of the legacy outlets and the Liberal questions, but no, you got to take the Liberal questions along with the Conservative ones, or you're no better than Jagmeet Singh when he stands there and Rebel asks him questions. He says, I don't answer questions from you. Well, then you're not a leader. And if you won't answer questions from CBC reporters or liberal-leaning reporters, you're not a leader either. You have to show that you can respond to those tough questions and be better than them and knock them down. Hiding from them doesn't help. They're not going away. So they're going to write something bad about you later anyways. So I don't know. Again, we'll see. We'll see. Monday night's coming up fast. People are going to be getting out to vote. Nenshi, let's travel. Speaking of people who might look for the federal leadership, I doubt he would do it, but some people throwing that name out there as a potential replacement for Singh. When they're talking about your replacement before the election's over, there's problems. But Nenshi is the leader of the NDP opposition in Alberta, for folks who aren't as familiar with Alberta politics here. He was the mayor of Calgary. He's the left of the left of the left. He's a deceptive weasel. He presented himself as a pro-business conservative when he ran for mayor, and now he's leading the NDP. It tells you all that he's about. But he's in New York pushing anti-oil and gas rhetoric. I just want to remind the listeners that that's what Nenshi's about today. He talks about being pro-Alberta, then leaves the province and speaks against Alberta. And, oh no, he's not anti-Alberta. I'm in New York talking about the transition. Yes, because we're all going to have fluffy little windmills and solar pads, and we're just going to shut in the oil and we'll all be rich and happy in a woke little Nenshi world. It doesn't work that way, you asshole. Nenshi also gave tens of thousands of tax dollars to the Pembina Institute when he was the mayor of Calgary. The Pembina Institute is an anti-oil and gas group. So I'm just doing my NDP counter work now before it comes to election time to remember in Alberta, whatever Nenshi might be, he is not good for this province or this country. Looking at unintended consequences. I heard the numbers for Tesla recently, and it looks like Musk is finally kind of backing away from the Trump, and the Doge and things like that. It was always supposed to be temporary, and that's fine and it's fair. But Tesla's had sales dropping in this quarter. We're looking at 70%. I'll tell you, mixing politics with business is never a good idea. Never. Especially when you're in a country like the States where, it always astounds me how close their elections are. They are a two-party system, and they're very polarized. So you're on one side, you're one on the other. If you visibly associate your company with one side or the other, you are alienating a giant customer base, and that's what's happened to them. There's been a few other things. People are getting sick of electric vehicles. They're realizing they're crap and that they always were crap. I mean, that's the news out in Canada lately too, that electric vehicle sales just aren't taking off, Tesla or otherwise, because they're crap. But we've had them shoved down our throats for years. And Carney is still going to try and ban oil and gas and vehicles when that comes up. This is going to lead to another financial disaster that we're heading towards. But Musk, I mean, it's not like he's going to have to worry about putting food on his table at any point in his life. You know, he could set aside $1 billion and probably still do okay for retirement. But to devastate your business like that by having a political association. I mean, when I used to own my pub, I'm an outspoken political guy, always have been, and I was then. But I didn't have political things going on in my pub and stuff like that. I didn't hang signs and things in there just because my people are coming there for burgers and beer and the band, not to come for the politics. And if I started playing the politics in my pub, I might draw a few folks, but for the most part, I'm going to lose a whole bunch of my customers because they didn't come for that in the first place. So it's just a sad thing to watch. Not saying everybody should be gagged. Just be careful with what you jump into when you, decide to be outspoken in politics if you're going to be in a public business position as well. Liberal candidates. Here's Jared was talking about the BC one who's running as an independent who might disrupt things. In Edmonton, one of the interesting ones, Rod Loyola. He was one of Nenchi's members of the legislature. And Loyola is a communist. I'm not saying it figuratively. He's a communist. He marched in communist marches and things like that. And he's also pro-Hamas. He's very much so, and all of that. To the point where even though he was the Liberal candidate for a little while, they kind of realized, holy crap, this guy's too crazy for us. Wasn't too crazy for Nenchi, but he's too crazy for the Liberals. So they wouldn't let him run for the Liberals. Well, he kept his Liberal signs. And the Liberals are trying to get a court injunction to stop it. So there's Rod Loyola signs all over the place, I guess, with the Liberal red and the whole works going on, just to confuse voters in Edmonton. He's bitter. What do you expect? Communists always are. That's going to be a funny one to watch in Edmonton anyways. Politics is just such a bizarre, nutty game. And that's why it attracts bizarre, nutty people like me and all the others. But okay, I've rambled long enough. We were kind of hoping we were going to get a live stream, but as Sean said and so on, it's just we can't quite get the coverage up there. There's going to be lots of stuff going on, but please, guys, set your clocks. We're going to be doing the live coverage. We'll have lots of bandwidth for that. From here, the Western Standard, whatever channel you're watching it on now, it's going to be there. Whether it's YouTube, whether it's X, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, we're going to have panels, we're going to have guests, and we're going to watch those results come in. Don't give your time to the legacy media. You don't need to do that anymore. Come here, participate, use the comments. Let's cover and watch what the hell's going to happen on Monday together. Of course, I'll be here for that. And spread the word, share that link, nag other people. Say, hey, don't watch CBC, don't watch CTV, don't watch Global, all those media prostitutes. Go to independent media here at the Western Standard. Get all your coverage here and get other people to do it. This is how we'll beat the system, guys. Stay independent. And then after that, I think the word independent is going to come up a whole lot. I'm sure going to talk about it a lot, depending on how things come out on Monday. Either way, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to get ready for the weekend. I hope you all have a good weekend, and we will see you all on Monday night.